Hello and welcome back. Well, let's see. Today I'm a warlock right now. I ain't really what I'm wanting to talk about though. It's a warlock. I wanted to talk about LFR. Yeah, and I mean I'm catching a lot of different theories on all of this because I just ran my first LFR run. Yeah, Black Gate I think it was. And I mean I'm understanding what they're saying about it being kind of a tourist mode. But on the same hand, you know, yeah, it's a tourist mode, and it does exactly what it's supposed to do. It lets you get to see content that you're not going to see unless you're a raider, so to speak. Now, anybody who believes that because they do LFR that makes them a raider is sadly mistaken. That doesn't make you a raider. You know, doing LFR doesn't make you a raider. It makes you, I don't want to say a casual player. Might be a casual raider, but not a casual player because you still had to put in the time to be the, you know, top guy, you know, to get to that point. You have to put in the time to get to 100. Anybody who gets to 100, even I would say that 90% of the people that are using LFR are players that have played for years that are not doing the 90 boost. You know, maybe there are some out there that are doing the 90 boost and getting the 10 and, you know, doing all that. But I'm figuring in my thought process that these are people that just never really either had the time or their skill level never really got high enough to be able to do raids. Yeah. Which is unfortunate on either side. Either they never really had the time to raid, so they didn't do it, or they, you know, just they never became a good enough player. Because there are so many other things to do in this game where you don't have to be a great player by definition of being a good raider or being able to raid. You know, at one point, you know, before this expansion, you know, and probably I guess before Mist of Pandoria too, you know, if you were a farmer, if you were able to spend the time to go out and, you know, farm your materials to make and craft things, you were still a valuable asset to the game for auction house reasons, for guild reasons. Because raiders, a lot of times, don't have the time to farm. They don't. They're spending so much time focusing on their gear. They're focused on doing runs to get the gear to make themselves better. Now, having that been said, LFR eliminates that. It eliminates you having to focus on gear. Even though the game is highly, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Dependent on your gear. Really, it is. I mean, unless you are a truly casual player, you are to some extent thinking of what your gear rating is. Just for simple quests. If you're a quester, you still have to be concerned with your gear. Because there are certain quests that, even at 100 in Warlords of Draenor, if you don't have the proper gear to go into that fight, you're going to lose every time. You know, you have to have the proper gear. You have to have the proper sets, and you have to be able to do this. So you have to have the gear to accomplish the feats that you're wanting to accomplish in the game, even if you're not a raider. And the only way to get the upper echelon gear so that you can do these in hard quests, you have to be able to raid. So I can understand LFR being useful on that point. And it also allows people to see the content, like I said before, that don't get to see it because they're not raiders, because they're not in a raiding guild. Because regardless, you still have to be in a raiding guild to do normal raids. You do. I mean, to do a normal raid, heroic raid, or a mythic raid, you have to be in one of those raiding guilds. You have to be in a guild that is dedicated to raiding. So if you're not in one of those guilds, you'll never see that content. You'll never be able to get your hands on that gear. You'll never be able to do that. Because heroic instances are only going to take you so far, gear wise. It's only going to allow you end up hitting a glass ceiling. But with LFR, it allows you to upgrade your gear without putting forth the time or effort that raiders do. Now, from a raider's aspect, yes, that makes you a tourist in raiding. Yes, you are a tourist. Sorry to say. In their eyes, you will always be a tourist. And you are a tourist in their eyes. That's all I'm saying. Because they put forth that effort. Now, as far as Blizzard putting LFR out there and it's just broken and it was a mistake and they should have never done it. No, I'm not saying that. What I am saying, though, is that your gear that you get from LFR should not match the quality of gear that you get from normal raiding. And what I'm saying by this is the stats on your LFR gear should never match the stats that are on a normal raiding tier. Ever. And from what I've gathered, that is what has happened. You go into a raid, you get this, bam. So why do normal raids? For the challenge? Okay, sure. Even as a hardcore raider, hell, I'd go do it. If I was a hardcore raider, I'd go do LFR just to get the basic gear to begin with. It's an easy run. It is. I just ran one earlier. It took me all of 15 minutes to run it. I think the record time was 17 minutes and something. And that's me actually doing the loading screen. That's me actually waiting for the bosses to talk and everything else. 17 minutes. Boom. Complete runtime. Completely done. And standing there for a little while running around going, is there anything else to do in here? Because it was only 3 bosses and it took us like that to do it. We were done. So, yeah. Okay. I've been in instances that take longer than this. Alright, so as a hardcore raider, I would use it as a stepping stone. Yeah. That way I can get the raid tier gear so that I can go into the normal raid. If they're I believe that the gear should grade from that point. It should be used as a stepping stone, not as a, or it shouldn't give gear at all. Which also eliminates people wanting to do it for that reason as well. Because if you take away the gear, so the only real way to solve that is to make sure that your LFR gear is not as good as your normal gear. And I don't believe that this whole everybody gets a piece of gear thing. That's that's stupid. That is. That yeah, you're losing part of the point of rating, really. I mean, it's just like, well, you're all on your own linear path, and there's nothing that can stop you. Yeah, it doesn't matter if there's 20 shaman in the run. Doesn't matter if there's 20 shaman in the run. You all are gonna get a piece of gear off that boss. How does that work? As long as you've got your little token and you've invested the time in having your dwarfen bunker and getting your tokens that you need so that you can be rewarded the gear in the runs, then everybody gets a piece of gear. Everybody gets a gold star for showing up. I don't think that's. Hey, I know there's plenty of people out there that are going, well, it's fair. I went in there and I fought. Yeah, but it used to be that you had to socialize. Now you can go in, fight, do your thing. You're gonna get your gear anyway, so you ain't got to talk to nobody. And LFR is a perfect example of that. It is. You know, I did 3 LFR runs, never spoke to anyone because you don't have to. At one point on the first run, I got lost. Nobody was even worried about me being there. You know why? Because you don't need us. You don't need 40 people. You don't. Those LFR could probably be done with 10 instead of 20. Instead of 25, it could be done with 15, a tank, some healers, and a couple of DPS. Yep, because the bosses aren't hitting hard enough to do any real damage, and you know DPS is hitting enough where they can take it down. They may not take it down as fast, but they're still taking it down. I believe LSR should have a little more challenge to it, and I believe that the gear should reflect the fact that it is not a true raid. Either you need to make sure that the gear does not reflect it being a true raid, or that the gear should be. Oh, not the gear. I'm sorry. The gear should reflect what the raid is, not the raid reflects the gear. You know what I'm saying? It's like you don't want. It's an easy raid. It's no more than an instant, so it shouldn't be giving out raid gear, tier gear. It should be giving out instant raid gear. You got to see the boss. Whoop de doo. You got to see the boss as an infant, as an. I mean, you know, I'm sitting there fighting this thing. I'm going, I could probably come in here as a healer. Guy, a DPS could come in here with a couple of healers and probably take this whole run by himself. Yeah. So either the LFRs have to be increased in difficulty, or the gear needs to reflect the fact that it's more of an instance run than a raid. Maybe they should be. Maybe it should be changed from looking for a raid to. I don't want to put forth any effort raids because that's what they are. There are no. It is no grand effort in this. You go in, your chances of dying are zero. They are. Yeah. I mean, you can't wipe. There's no way to wipe. I mean, you got guys running around doing all kinds of stupid shit. Some of them ain't even fighting the boss. Not worried about mechanics, nothing else. But, but, they are beating the boss without a problem. Nobody's dying. The healers are just throwing heals out everywhere. They're not worried about nothing. You're not learning how to raid like that. LFR was supposed to be meant to be a training area for raiding. I don't understand how it's a training area though. It's the easiest thing I've done. I've done instances in Burning Crusade and Lynch King that made LFR look like a walk in the park. I mean, I've done when I first started playing. I did quests that were harder than these LFR runs that I'm doing. You know, you don't hear the words "watch out for the mechanics" in an LFR run. You know why? Because they don't matter. The boss is just standing there taking abuse. Yep, that's what it is. So, having that been said, I'm curious to see how things really play out in the end results of it, because that's where the next expansion, how LFR evolves from there. Because LFR at this point isn't, it's not really looking for raid. We were better off pugging looking for raid than to have an LFR, because LFR is just too simple. You're not you're not challenged. You're not creating raiders. You're not. You're creating people that are getting gear just by showing up, just by queuing in. That's all I have to do to get gear. Just queue in. Stand over to the side. Don't do anything. Let half the group do the fighting. You can run around with no armor on playing games, right? So yeah, either make LFR off the bat, just say, look, LFR is nothing more than a tourist mode, and remove gear, and if they run the LFRs, they get a badge, or they bring back honor, they bring back some kind of gear currency thing, like where they had in Burning Crusade, where you had badges, or when you were in Lynch King, you had emblems and things like this. These things would work in an LFR environment. You go in, you get so many badges off each of the bosses. It takes 15 minutes. You can run as many times as you want. Yes, you could end up with good gear after running it a few times. Now, is everybody going to do that? Yes. If they want to get into raiding, they will. They'll do that. But on that same hand, you make the boss fights and the raid itself at least as difficult as the instances are. In other words, if you want to dumb down the boss, okay, fine. Dumb down the numbers too. You don't send a 25-man group in for a guy that hits no harder than your instance boss. That makes no sense. Why would you do that? I mean, I might as well be go soloing, Firelands like I normally do. You know, at least there I get more gold, and I can use the gold to do other things. Buy mounts and things like that, and use it to upgrade my garrison. Because your rewards aren't matching anything. So, yeah. I guess in conclusion, I think that it needs to be severely revamped, and it needs to be looked at more as, if you're going to make it where anybody can go in and everybody can see instances, then if you want them to see the content, that's fine. But don't be handing them raid gear. It's pointless. Don't be handing them gear and walk into a raid with, because then they come in geared and people think that they can play, and they can't. They don't know the mechanics of the fights. They don't understand them. And yeah, I can understand where raiders are like, oh yeah, you've been doing LFR, yeah, yeah, jerk off. I can understand that. Because back when I used to raid, yeah, if LFR was around, we would have thought it was a joke. So yeah, guess my conclusions are that LFR needs to be revamped, readjusted, or presented differently to us. It should be straight up just no, it's a tourist thing. It's not a stepping stone. Any real raider is not going to use that as a stepping stone, because that's a joke. Yeah, they're going to do it for the gear. Don't make it like that. Well, But as I was saying, it it makes no sense to. I'm just gonna have to redo this whole video. That's complete shot up. So.